Night in the Woods is an adventure game driven by narrative and exploration. The story is set in a nostalgic Rust Belt town full of anthropomorphic citizens, including recent college dropout and protagonist Mae Borowski. As you direct Mae's experience returning to her hometown, there's no real discernible direction to her days, besides hanging out with friends, exhausting every dialogue option with minor characters, and investigating a local mystery. Night in the Woods is one of the most meaningful games I've ever played. Simultaneously, player choices, as instrumental as they are to the video game genre, are both minimal and practically meaningless. This, in turn, is what gives the game its meaning. The game starts off with an interactive story rather than a cutscene that you just watch. This is actually the beginning sequence that was never developed and put into the final version of the game. Here's the real opening, just a black screen with white text. It sets up, in the year Granddad died. You get to choose the next line, though your options are limited. The left and right arrows constrain you to two options for this point. Either a highway was constructed or there was a flood. The rest of that first stanza is then generated according to your input. The next stanza begins the same regardless of which option you picked in the first, though the player has no way of knowing that without restarting the game. It lets you decide the beginning of the grandfather's quote in the hospital with 3 different options that the game then completes for you. And in the third stanza, regardless of your previous choices, you decide what Mae's grandfather was staring at through the window, either the old trains, playground, parking lots, or the mill. It might seem like the entirety of this is generated differently depending on your responses, but that's not true. The story is the same in many points, regardless of what you pick. Here you can see a playthrough of completely different choices, yet those main points and ending remain exactly the same. Furthermore, your choices in the construction of this story have absolutely no impact on the events of the game or its ending. Nobody ever brings up what Mae's granddad quoted before he died, or what he was looking at. I like to think that the way this opening operates is intentional, because it reflects the course of the game. Most of the events are exactly the same regardless of what choice you make, and when you are prompted to make a choice, it's on the game's terms, and with little effect other than alterations in dialogue. Still, there's the illusion of choice. As Night in the Woods is a linear game, it's impossible to go back and explore other options without entirely restarting. If you were to witness only one playthrough, you wouldn't know that the paths you never took brought you to the same exact place. Choice is traditionally what diverges video games from film. Even before video games, game books like the Choose Your Own Adventure series diverged away from locked-in storytelling on the axis of choice. Choice is what makes a game. So what is the point of Night in the Woods having so little of it? Immediately after the opening, the player is subjected to Mae's own input on the introductory circumstances with absolutely no control over her perspective. She's grumpy that her parents didn't come to pick her up from the bus station. She seems to crush on Fiasco Fox, the mascot, or maybe Celebrity on the soda machine, and she assesses the damage done to a payphone, even judging it and asking what jerk would do that. Your input is not needed, and you cannot really make any decisions except to participate in moving the story along by triggering Mae's own observations. Similar to the formatting of the text-based story, the player shares their autonomy with Mae, and by extension, the game. You move the cat using the usual WASD keys and interact with things and people when possible by pressing the C key when prompted by those pop-up bubbles. Mae's commentary is usually entirely her own, though you'll often have the ability to make a limited choice in dialogue. Sometimes that just means an alteration in wording or a direct choice between different question or response options. Even when the player is attempting to guide dialogue, they'll find that Mae has control over the majority of the conversation. The game has this feature that I saw a developer call pause mode, where you're able to interact with your surroundings, but you're not really making a choice or having any control over the outcome of the situation. You're just engaging with the game in a more interactive mode. Geniusly, the player's overall lack of agency or attempt to maximize what little control they really have is reflected everywhere in the game. Upon her return, Mae somehow loses her agency because of how much she has. She doesn't take advantage of it. She sleeps in every day no matter what you do, and it's kind of impossible to transfer any of your will to her. You can't give her direction. Her friends have jobs and ambitions, while Mae seems to relish in her return to her freewheeling days. If you take each interactive bubble opportunity, you spend a lot of time doing mundane things, sitting on your kitchen counter, goofing off on the computer, talking to random people. May's backstory includes her sort of beating another kid when she was younger. She says everything was just shapes, which indicates it might have been a dissociative episode. Paired with her daily habits, it seems like factors outside of May's control have taken away a lot of her agency. Unfortunately, she turns to destruction to get it back. There's one moment in pause mode that I think illustrates it really well, where her evening is going terribly and she starts to vandalize a diner bathroom. She doesn't explain why, but it seems to be a way to exert some control over something. She also unwittingly controls you, the player. Even though you might want to disobey her wishes, and her good conscience and retrospective reflection might as well, she's too caught up in the moment to stop. The scene is super interesting to me because she seems to lose control in an attempt to regain it. The back and forth with the player is intriguing too, as it's sort of a backwards fight for power, with her requiring us to enable her vandalism. This interactive mode can also be used to put you on the same page as May. There are a few points where you have to play bass for her band. The notes come really fast and you have no preparation. Most people fail, or at least I did. You're supposed to, because May has no reason to succeed. She just came back home and hasn't practiced these songs. You're both out of your element and certainly not in control of your guitar playing skills. The game also provides these sequences in which you're able to guide May through her dreams. In them, she has cryptic but important tasks. Eventually, she sort of meets God, or at least a god-cat figure, who stresses her complete powerlessness in the universe. The other main characters also show how external factors have disempowered them. Bea, for example, couldn't afford to go to college and instead is stuck in Possum Springs running a hardware store all day. Greg and Angus, as a gay couple, have spent all of their time and energy saving money to finally move out of their closed-minded small town. Even in the most climactic moment of the game, in which you finally confront the dark mystery haunting Possum Springs, your actions actually don't change the course of the game. Here, you're supposed to spam the C button to save yourself as May. However, you can just not press the button. You don't die. Your friends have to step in and save you, but their dialogue is only slightly altered to explain that. So, without the sprawling pathways of events, choices, and endings that players are used to, what even is the point of this game? Well, May's journal, mostly. The experiences you have are often reflected in these little doodles she makes. Depending on who you're closer with, by the end of the game, it could be Bea or Greg and Angus sitting with May on that last page. In the traditional sense of a game, it's kind of like an achievements page, where you can collect these little icons only if you've succeeded in having these experiences. The way that it connects to the theme of the story, though, makes it mean so much more. Her journal is actually a form of therapy. Since her episode made her see people as just shapes, this book is a way for her to attribute as much meaning as she possibly can to each person and experience that she has. In the grand scheme of the story, she doesn't have much agency beyond that. The player, too, is proven to not bring any more power to the table than what May has. No added insight or abilities, just a little input here and there. Bea, Greg, Angus, they're all spending their days working because they have to, waiting to live the lives they want. Everybody can go on adventures together, though. And that's just how it ends. Nobody has that much power or influence or control. There aren't a ton of choices to be made or different things to say. It's not what you'd expect of a video game, where you'd typically prefer to have the ability to say or do whatever you want, leading to hundreds of different conquests and conclusions. But no, Night in the Woods essentially has one ending, just with little variances. Different players can collect different personal experiences, but the rest is largely the same. That's what makes all these events and bonds all the more meaningful. They're all you have.